After the arson attack on ambulances owned by a Jewish charity in Golders Green on Monday, a group of people confronted an Al Jazeera journalist.
Now you can go. Go take your briefcase, go take your Al Jazeera equipment and go. No one needs Al Jazeera. No one wants Al Jazeera over here.
You don't decide.
Go back to Qatar.
Of course.
You represent an entity that has questionable motives and by association.
امشي من هون يا حمار.
امشي من هون. Or you will be moved.
No. Don't be violent. امشي من هون يا حمار.
Calm down.
I'm calm.
لا امشي من هون.
امشي من هون يا حمار يا كلب. يا كلب روح من هون. لا مالو. ما تعوسه.
أنا لا خمر، أنت خمر.
أنا خمار. I'm walking.
It turns out that the man in the grey hoodie there, who called the journalist a dog and told him to go back to Qatar, is a Metropolitan Police officer. The investigative outlet Declassified UK has identified the man as Special Constable David Soffer. Soffer appears to be a staunch supporter of Israel, whose military has killed multiple Al Jazeera journalists while covering the genocide in Gaza, along with members of their families. He also seems to be a fan of far-right agitator Tommy Robinson. In 2024, Robinson shared a graphic on Twitter that said "fuck Palestine" and wrote, "The shithole is full of inbred Islamist parasites and terrorists." Soffer replied to the post to say that Robinson is telling the truth and that Israel would justly finish what it started in Gaza, according to Declassified's report. But it's not just a few bad apples at the Met with a questionable stance on Palestine. Yesterday, the force announced that it will be continuing to arrest people who express support for Palestine action, even though the High Court has ruled that the ban on the group is unlawful. When making the ruling in February, the court said that the ban would remain in place during the appeals process. But at the time, the Met said they wouldn't make any new arrests. Now, though, they're saying that they've revised their approach from the interim position that they took after the ruling. This is what Assistant Deputy Commissioner James Harman said about the U-turn. That means it is still a criminal offence to support Palestine action. We must enforce the law as it is at the time, not as it might be at a future date. We must do that consistently and without fear or favour. The campaign group Defend Our Juries, which has organised sustained protests against the ban, was quick to question the logic of this statement, and they said something else. The ban on Palestine action is ruled currently unlawful. Right now, nothing says clear guidance like regularly changing your mind over the unlawful arrests of thousands of peaceful protesters for holding paper signs. The Court of Appeal is set to hear the government's case against the ruling at the end of April, but the Met has said the case could last many months. That means the police force may well have to endure even more damage to its reputation by continuing to arrest elderly people and people with disabilities as they peacefully oppose the ban. Defend Our Juries has already announced a protest in London for next month. And again, Curtis, it does seem to me that it's an incongruent position. They're saying, oh, well, we can't police based upon what we think it'll be at a future date. But we have a current ruling now, as far as I can see, that the issue is that what could change in future is that ruling could then be overturned by the Court of Appeal. I mean, I'm not a legal expert, I'm not a policing expert, but it does seem to me like the interim position that they're talking about there was far more of a reasonable position to take when you know that there is at least some amount of ambiguity over what the actual law states in regard to whether or not the Palestine action can be banned lawfully under terrorism legislation. What do you think?
I don't think you need to be a legal expert or a police expert to understand that you just follow the current court ruling. The court ruled that banning Palestine Action supporters and arresting these people was deemed unlawful. And it wasn't that, oh, from now on, it's unlawful. It was retrospective. So all of the thousands of people that are arrested, all those lovely old grannies holding up signs peacefully protesting a genocide, that was deemed unlawful. And at least the Met Police could say, right, this new court ruling has happened, we're going to go with this guidance. That was the sensible thing to do. And now they've basically changed seemingly on a whim, but actually, no, we are going to make these arrests now. What, based on a future prediction? That's not what we want. We don't want policing based on vibes or potentially the future. We want our police to be policing on logic and what the law says. Of course, that would be assuming that we have a non-corruptible police force in this country. I mean, that's not the case. Of course, the Met Police has been found to be institutionally sexist and racist. In terms of the Al Jazeera journalist being assaulted, I think correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the officer called him a dog, which is absolutely disgraceful. I think he needs to go. This wasn't just some random person who was getting really, really angry. This is a member of the police force. And at least the idea of the police is to protect everyone. And again, I'll point to the institutional racism and sexism that shows that's not the case. But that's the idea behind it. Look, I do have to point out this double standards here. If this was a Muslim man who did that, you would hear the right-wing media cry that this is a no-go zone, that people can't do journalism and it's being taken over by the Muslims. I have to point that double standard out there because this isn't really being covered that widely. I mean, independent media circles, a bit of mainstream media, but right-wing shows are not eating this up as they would. So I think that's something to think about. What I think the behaviour from the police and why they've decided to start saying we're going to arrest these people again is I think it's downstream from our government policy, which is our government policy is to support Israel. We are still enabling a genocide. We're still sending arms. We're still funding them. And that kind of tells people within British society that this is still okay. And I think if you're working for the state, i.e. as a police officer, you're kind of told that, you know what, it's enabled, actually, that you can behave in this way, think this certain way, because our government policy basically says it's okay to do so. I do think if our government policy was a just one, in which we said we're not sending any weapons to Israel, we are going to call them out on their genocide, then maybe the behaviour might be different. I can't guarantee that, of course, but I do think that the behaviour from the police is all downstream from that. Finally, this particular officer, he shared or he replied to Tommy Robinson on social media. Tommy Robinson was saying some foul and disgusting things about Muslims. And this guy was like, yeah, you're right. This is the truth. Again, this is a public servant. They should absolutely not be in that position if they're doing that. People will have personal opinions, right? You cannot be displaying that on social media when you're part of the Met Police. I think he needs to go.
I mean, can you imagine what the furore would be like online if the kind of statements that Tommy Robinson made about Palestinians were made about Jewish people, and some ethnic minority officer echoed those same statements, right? Instant scandal. There would be an instant level to which they would be demanded to be sacked, and rightly so. Yeah, and rightly so. But yet when it's the same kind of racism displayed against Palestinians, we don't seem to see any kind of reaction to that outside of, declassified and obviously, of course, now us and people on the internet. Why do you think that is?
I think it's baked in with the hierarchy of racism. We've all seen that now, and I'm glad people are waking up to the hierarchy of racism. It doesn't mean that anti-Semitism doesn't matter. What it means is, and in my personal view, I think Zionism is anti-Semitic because you've got so many people who will throw anti-Zionist Jews under the bus, attack them for not being pro-Israel enough, right? I think a lot of the people, I saw a clip of Julia Hartley-Brewer decrying anti-Semitism over the art gallery, and I'm just thinking, I don't think you're concerned about anti-Semitism. You're concerned about your pro-Israel angle. And I think that's why we would see a very different response if it was against a person of colour or a Palestinian or a Muslim. Because again, the hierarchy of racism is baked into our institutions. It's baked into our media. And by the way, that Sofa, the officer, people are claiming it was never a police officer. He was. He just removed his job as at the Met Police from LinkedIn. He's trying to now hide it.
Well, there we go. Again, the hierarchy of racism doesn't seem to ever go away in this country.